So let's create an API call that will create multiple bands at the same time. We could add it to our bands controller as another action, but I'm actually going to create another controller because this is a fairly special case. So in the controllers folder, let's add another class, and I'll call it band collections controller. And as we already know, it's going to inherit from controller base. Let's bring in the namespace, and let's set up this as an API controller. And let's create a route to this, and the route can be simply API/band collections, for example. So it's gonna be API/band collections. Now we of course have to inject the mapper as well as the repository. So let's go to bands controller and actually copy that. So I'll copy the repository and the mapper and paste it right here. Of course, the constructor is now for band collections controller. Let's bring in the namespaces for the repository and for the mapper, and it is now injected in our controller. We don't have to make any changes here. We're simply going to use the mapper and repository the same way we used it in bands controller. So let's create our action, and since we are going to create new bands, it's going to be HTTP post, and it's going to be a public action, and it's going to be again action result because it's going to be of type band DTO, and it's going to be a collection of band DTO. So it's IEnumerable of type band DTO, and I'll call this create band collection. So let's bring in the namespace for band DTO, which is in the models folder, and let's pass in an argument in our action here, and the argument of course will come from body, and what we are passing here is a collection of the band for creation DTO, because we are creating multiple bands, but we are still using the same DTO for creation. We just make it IEnumerable. So it's going to be IEnumerable of type band for creating DTO. And I'll just call it band collection. So how do we do that? Well, it's actually fairly simple. First of all, we have to map the entities into our band collection. And since we have it as IEnumerable here, we also have to have the IEnumerable in our mapper for the entity itself. So I'll create a variable and call it band entities, and we'll go to our mapper and create a map, and this time we are creating a map between IEnumerable of the entities of band. So that's our destination, and the source is the band collection, which already is in IEnumerable format. And now we can add each of the bands in our context. So we'll use a for each loop, and we'll loop through a band in the band entities, and in each iteration we will go to our band album repository and call the add band method. And the band we are passing in, of course, is one at a time, so we'll pass in the band to it. And after that, we can simply save everything that's in our context in a database. So we again go to our band album repository and call the save method. And after the bands are saved in the database, we are simply going to return an OK. So we are not going to redirect to an action that would display these bands, because we would need an action with IDs of the bands that we just created to be passed into it. So for now, we're just going to have a return OK. So let's run this and test this. So I'm going to post, and we'll go to API/band collections, because remember, that is our route that we are using for this controller, and let's create few bands. So I'll remove what we had in the body from our previous API test. So let's create two bands. So it's a collection, so I'll use brackets first. And let's create the first band. And it has three properties. The first one is name. And this one can be band 1. Then it has the founded date. So it's gonna be founded. And let's just add a date. And let's add main genre. And let's say this one is rock. Now let's add another band. And I'm just gonna copy these three properties, paste them right here. And this is gonna be band 2. Let's say this one is gonna be in 1981 as founded. And this is gonna be heavy metal. Alright, so let's send this. And we have 200 OK. So the bands were created. So we currently don't see them because we were not redirected to see them. We only got the 200 OK. But when we go to get, and when we go to API/bands, those two bands should be now here. And you can see here's the band 1 and here's the band 2. So we were able to successfully create multiple bands in one API call. So next, let's examine a scenario where the user will try to create a band with an ID.